as the first Philippine REIT, we want quality assets in good locations that are familiar to our investors. And Ayala Land as a company still owns majority of AREIT. And so what's best for AREIT is also what's good for Ayala Land. We can acquire from our sponsor, which is Ayala Land, or we can also acquire from third parties if there are good opportunities out there. But we will always choose prime locations, stable income and occupancy, and assets that will really add incrementally to the dividends of AREIT.
Hi everyone, we are in for a very special treat today. I know you guys had a lot of questions about AREIT, what's happening, where's it headed, but this is very special because we have their CEO, Carol Mills, joining us in the podcast today. So we're gonna ask a lot of very, very interesting questions about AREIT. So Carol, before we begin, how are you in the midst of this lockdown?
Very well. Actually, we've been very busy throughout the year. Of course, we listed AREIT, in August, so it's been a very busy year for both Ayala Land, our office group, and AREIT. And thank you, Marvin. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about AREIT in your video. I actually sometimes get to watch your videos, and I'm really, really amazed how you're teaching and inspiring so many people on investments.
Wow, thank you so much for that. But that's really the heart of this channel, that we give people information so they get to also decide on what they're supposed to do with their money. So I'll go right in the middle of this already. There's a lot of people who are a bit concerned because of the pandemic and it's affecting the property market. My question specifically, how is AREITs and the properties of AREIT faring in the midst of all of this?
We've been doing quite well, actually, for AREIT. It's been a blessing. All our buildings stayed open and operate throughout, from the start of the lockdown up to today. Our buildings are 100% occupied, and substantially, our tenants are office tenants who are conducting their businesses both in the office, or sometimes a combination of the office and the home. As you know, about 90% of AREIT's tenants are, BPOs and traditional headquarter companies, and we have no POGO tenants. So these big BPO companies, financial institutions, banks, insurance, healthcare companies, have been continuously operating throughout because their services are considered as essential and critical throughout. We have a few retail tenants, but less than 10% of the portfolio, most of which are really just basic and essential stores like food, convenience stores, serving most of the office workers and residents nearby. And most of them also continue to operate. So it's been stable as far as AREIT is concerned, as far as the office sector is concerned. So you can expect that the regularity in dividends for AREIT will continue.
I'm curious about this, that since it's sort of locked in that your tenants are connected to the BPO industry, is there a possibility that there could be any threat towards this changing in the future also? That we may see foreseeable shifts also on your tenants?
Many of our tenants are top-ranking global companies and that have been operating throughout decades, even during the past global crisis. And no, we don't have exposure to POGOs, whether they're the POGOs who are doing the actual gaming operations or what they call back office gaming operations. We have none of that in AREIT, so it's not risky in that way. No, we have long-term contracts in place, so our average lease expiration as of today is a little over than 5 years, and we hardly have any lease expirations in the next 2 years. And typically, when an office signs a lease contract, if they're happy with the building, they renew their lease several times, because it's also hard for a big office business to just relocate. They'll have to invest in new fit out, they have to move their employees. So the tendency is the office tenants renew not just once or even twice, more than twice or thrice, their contracts in their office buildings. And on our part, Marvin, we're also ensuring that our buildings are well maintained, they are safe, our equipment are consistently running, air cons, elevators, gensets. We maintain them properly so that our tenants can operate smoothly, without problems, without interruptions. In fact, during the lockdown, we housed many of our service personnel, the guards, the building technicians, the engineers, the janitors. We housed them, we provided them food and lodging to keep them safe from the pandemic. Because if they are safe, then our buildings will all be safe as well, and our tenants can continue to operate. No? So that's what we did to prevent any threat or disruption in our operations.
And that's what's nice about it. That's what I tell a lot of people also when it comes to investing. Look for companies with predictability. I really believe that the more predictable it is, especially the locked-in rental rates, which makes it good and a bit gives a sense of ease, especially for investors. Anyways, I'm curious about this. No, there's a lot of buildings under Ayala Land's portfolio. I'm so curious, why did you pick these three buildings and why specifically in Makati as well?
Yeah, so we chose Makati buildings as our first three assets in the REIT because they're good buildings. They're prime location, grade A, good quality tenants, and vacancy in Makati for the last decade has been the lowest in the country, and even compared to Southeast Asia. So as the first Philippine REIT, we want quality assets in good locations that are familiar to our investors. And Ayala Land as a company still owns majority of AREIT. And so what's best for AREIT is also what's good for Ayala Land.
When you did the listing, it was already disclosed at that time that you would include a property in Cebu, the Teleperformance building. Then I was actually shocked that there was a fifth building also that was included into the mix. My question into that is, what was the process on going to Cebu and then another one in Ortigas, and as compared to not just concentrating everything in Makati as well?
AREIT will somehow be similar to the locations of Ayala Land. And in Ayala Land, as far as our office portfolio is concerned, we have presence in 6 cities, no, in Metro Manila. So we have in Makati, Taguig, Quezon City, Pasig, Muntinlupa, and Pasay. And then for provincial, our major presence, of course, is in Cebu. So since Ayala Land is our sponsor, then naturally our locations will be similar to that of Ayala Land. And we believe that these are really the key growth areas for offices because of the population size of these cities, the talent pool, the infrastructure in those areas, and the land bank of Ayala Land is there. Now, AREIT didn't have, of course, all of these locations from the start because it will also take time for us to add the assets. No? So we wanted to start with a good baseline, which is Makati, and expand it over time. I guess pretty much how Ayala Land was, no? Historically, many years ago, it started in Makati, and then Cebu, and then expanded to many other growth areas. We believe it is good that AREIT will have a portfolio of diversified locations for risk management, not concentrated in just one location. Why do I say this? If we are concentrated in just one city or location and suddenly there's a high vacancy in that area, then it's risky, right? Versus having several buildings in several locations. It's more balanced that way.
You mentioned that you plan to further expand similar to how Ayala Land was or is currently doing. Uh, what's the plan for the future for AREIT? Is the goal similar to what you've been doing now that we'll just keep on adding more buildings under the same company, or will you look for something different, which will be a totally different set of buildings?
Yes, definitely we intend to grow AREIT. Now, AREIT is the commercial and the flagship REIT of Ayala Land. And from our IPO in August, so that's about 4 months ago, we've already added two buildings. And next year, we also have plans to acquire more. When we acquire assets, we can acquire from our sponsor, which is Ayala Land, or we can also acquire from third parties if there are good opportunities out there. But we will always choose prime locations, stable income and occupancy, and assets that will really add incrementally to the dividends of AREIT.
Your last purchase was the property in Ortigas. How does this impact a REITs physically? Because as you all know, for REITs also, a large chunk of the revenue is brought back as dividend. So what's left for the company is lesser than a normal property development company. How will be the funding also for properties in the future?
So if you will recall, we did the IPO in August. We started with 150,000 square meters. Then we acquired the Cebu property, and that increased our total portfolio from 150 to 170,000 square meters. And since we bought the Cebu property in September, so the income of that started in AREIT in October, and that will be reflected then in our fourth quarter dividends moving forward. Then after that, we acquired the 30th in Pasig. So from 170,000, we will now reach, I think, 240,000 GLA. And that property will be transferred to AREIT hopefully by next month. So income from that will start by first quarter next year. So as you can see, it's gradually increasing every quarter, not just from the income of our existing properties, but also from the income of newly acquired assets. So that's the growth that you can expect from AREIT. And then I think, Marvin, you asked about the funding, right?
Yeah.
Currently, AREIT has no debt. So that's a good thing because REITs can actually borrow up to 35% or even more if it has a high credit rating, which AREIT does. But for now, we intend to maximize our borrowing around 30 to 35%. So that would give us capacity to leverage for growth, especially now that interest rates are very low. So because interest rates are low, the income of our building, even after paying debt, will give enough income to be distributed as dividends.
And that's very, very comforting to hear also, no? Especially when you mentioned about the dividends, that as more properties are added, it allows for revenue to come in, and then it helps also get more as well. Here's a very interesting question that a lot of people have been asking me also. For people who have cash, and for you being someone who has been in the property development business for quite some time already, what would you say head to head would be the biggest advantage of basically investing in a REIT versus buying an Ayala Land condo where paparent nila yung condo na yon and get rental income? So I'm asking this because there's still a lot of people who don't know the concept of REIT. You can also explain it in a way that, teka muna, fit yata sa akin yung na investment.
A condo is an investment in a physical property. So you can lease it out, you can earn income from it. And to do this, of course, you have to kind of exert some effort or personal management because you have to fit it out, you have to buy appliances, you have to find a tenant, you have to pay some expenses like property tax, condo dues if it's not covered by the rent of your tenant. You have to pay income tax from, of course, and you also have to physically maintain it over time. That's really part of owning a condo. Of course, the condo will appreciate in value over time, and if you decide to personally use it at some point, a REIT is like owning a condo for lease, but instead of owning the physical property, you are owning shares of the company that will earn you regular dividend income like a rental property. The difference is that it won't entail so much, of your personal time or effort because the dividends just come in and it gets deposited literally to your account. No? So it just goes to you. So aside from that, of course, aside from owning it like a rental property, it also has tax advantages to the investor. So for Filipino individuals, the dividend is taxed 10%, unlike the regular income tax. And for domestic corporations, let's say you have a family corporation that own the AREIT shares, then there's no tax on dividends. And again, there's also no property tax because you own shares and not the physical property. Another difference is that a condo is residential. At least most of our condos are here residential, while AREIT owns commercial buildings. And now we know that owning office buildings or office units, say in Makati, will entail a lot of money, and it's usually owned by big companies, right? So AREIT, in a way, enables you and I, individual investors to own a piece of, an office unit or an office property in Makati by owning the REIT shares, by owning a REIT shares that earns income from these buildings. So if you already have a residential condo and you want to sort of balance that effectively by owning naman a commercial property, then you can do that through a REIT. Another difference, sorry, it's a bit long, Marvin. Another difference.
This allows people also to take the time to digest this. So keep on going lang.
Okay, good. Thank you. So another difference, another difference that can be actually an advantage is that the liquidity of these REIT shares, which is traded in the stock market. So it's easy to buy and sell anytime, unlike buying or selling a property, which will take time. In a way, it's also more affordable or more flexible to invest because you don't need to raise such a big amount of money. You can just buy a few shares every so often and then grow it over time. And likewise, you need to sell because you need some. Then you don't need to sell everything. Unlike a condo, if you really need the cash, you have to sell it in one go. This one, you can sell a few shares just to raise the cash that you need at the time. It really depends on the investor, your personal preferences, your needs, your risk appetite, your personal time, and the amount of money that you are ready to invest. So it really depends. One is not necessarily a better investment than the other. The real advantage, though, is that we now have a new investment product, to balance what you already have or to try this new investment. So you can start small and just grow it over time.
Yep.
There will always be a need for a place of work or an office that will not necessarily disappear, especially if you're in a good location. Many companies now are doing a balance of having their main office as well as a flexible setup. And the degree to which they do more of their main office versus the flexible setup depends on the nature also of the company.